Hey, Patreons, welcome back to the Spotlight. This is our show where we talk to creators and luminaries in the pop culture space. I am joined tonight by a gentleman who has worked on Marvel comics like Spider-Man, The Defenders, The Fantastic Four, which we were talking about in the pre-roll, Deathlok, Silver Sable, a favorite of mine, and over on DC for two-thirds of the Holy Trinity, Superman and Batman. I'm talking, of course, about Gregory Wright. Gregory, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I like to launch right into it. And the first question is always super duper obvious. How did you get started? How did you get into this world that we love?
By mistake. I went to film school with D.G. Chichester, who you probably know from writing Daredevil.
Yeah.
And he had gotten a paid internship at Marvel working under Jim Shooter, which turned into an assistant editor job in the Epic department, the creator-owned department under Archie Goodwin. And when I graduated from school, I didn't know what I was going to do while we were, going to put our independent film that was going to put us on the map together. So I thought, I'm going to go work in a grocery store because that's what I did prior to going to school.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. We've got an opening in the Epic department. Come in and interview for that. It's just an editorial assistant, but it's creative. You'll be in an office. It'll be fun. And I'll be there. And I said, okay. So I went in. I had an interview with Joe Duffy, who was the editor in charge. And during the interview, in walks one of the few people who I knew in the comics industry from being a kid, Archie Goodwin, who was the editor in chief. And I actually was kind of starstruck when he came in because, Archie had written a bunch of things and he'd done a lot of work with Walt Simonson that I'd had, he'd done some movie adaptations and one of my favorite books, he'd done Manhunter. So he came in and he says, don't mind me, I'm just in charge. And I'm just like, and he was refilling a candy jar because he always had this candy jar on his desk and everybody in the office would come through and snatch candy out of. So he was always refilling it and asked me if I wanted a piece of candy and no, thanks.
No,
it was a little tricky to finish my interview.
Yeah.
But I finished my interview. Joe offered me the job, and then I don't know what I was thinking. I said, "Well, can I give it 24 hours thought?" Because I thought that's the thing you do.
Right.
You don't automatically say yes. And she
Never
said,
take
"Well,
first
sure,
offer.
you can think about it for 24 hours. But if the next person I interview is just as good, they'll take the job."
Forget about it.
Said, well, I guess I'll take the job then.
Quick reversal.
That was how I entered the business over at the Epic Comics. And the editorial assistant position really was like a glorified sort of secretary / receptionist. And, the department consisted of, Archie, Joe, Margaret Clark, and D.G. Chichester. And Margaret and Dan had no interest in me answering their phones or typing letters or anything for them. So it was only really Archie and Joe. And they liked having their phone answered. So they did that. There really wasn't much else for me to do. So Archie used to, he would bring me stuff and say, okay, I want you to read all of the line, and then we'll have a conversation. So he wanted to know what I thought about everything. So Once I got caught up, then I was reading the books as they went out. And then I would have this little conversation with Archie. He was just trying to give me something to do, but he really wanted to know what somebody else thought. So I'm reading, Moonshadow, and I'm reading Elektra Assassin, and then having a discussion about what do I think about it with Archie Goodwin, who took me every bit as seriously as he would take, talking to somebody who wasn't some new person out of nowhere. So they did a really nice job of always trying to keep me busy, teaching me everything that I needed to know about editorial, everything I needed to know about the technical side of comics, because their goal was to make sure that the comics were that they looked as good as they possibly could for the creators, because it was all about the creators. And then they helped me get my job with Mark Grunwald as an assistant editor over on the Marvel side, where I was very surprised to find out that they were not all dedicated to the creators, because they were in charge and they were dedicated to the book.
Right.
So if they decided they wanted to have something rewritten, it was rewritten. There was no discussion if they wanted to erase half the page and have John Romita draw something else in. They just did it. There was, they didn't really have the respect for the creators that we were taught at Epic. So that was a huge culture shock for me. So I tried to bring some of that respect for the creator to the Marvel side that I'd gotten over at Epic.
Wow.
So that's how I got my start. That's my funny little origin story.
Fantastic. A colleague of mine, Kurt Krug, you've talked to him. He actually said, I let him know that I was going to be talking to you, and I've had an enormous admiration for Mark Gruenwald.
Oh yeah,
forever, because his run on Cap, I go back and read it every couple of years. That the Captain run from 332 to 350. I revisit that. And Kurt said, well, that Mark was a mentor of sorts to Gregory. So, I'd love to hear more about that. He was, and if he was here, if he was still with us, he would be somebody I would pursue to talk to, and he'd be on my bucket list. So
and he would, if Mark, he would love all the podcasting and all the Marvel movies, and he would have his own podcast, because he used to actually have this little TV show on cable called Cheap Laughs. That he did with Elliot Brown and Mike Carlin and John. I can't remember his last name anyway. But so it was this funny little comedy show. They did comedy skits, and it was on cable TV. And my interview with him had nothing to do with comics. We talked about the Twilight Zone, and he asked me about film school, because he was hoping that maybe we could do some more Cheap Laughs. And I thought that would be exciting, but we never got to do that, which was really disappointing, because I wanted to be part of that. But Mark was a phenomenal mentor to everybody that came near him. And he was an even better friend. It's like, if there was, if you watched anybody in the office doing something incredibly stupid and weird and embarrassing, the likelihood is Mark convinced you to do it. So, if he told us to, take off our clothes and dance in our underwear, we would have. That never happened. I don't think that ever happened. But, Mark would get you to do stuff you didn't want to do. He would get you out of your comfort zone. And, he was one of those really generous people with ideas. So, he didn't, he would give away ideas to people, and that they would go and do a comic that made money, and he would be really happy that they did it. And, he was that guy that, no jealousy, like to get, when we did Solo Avengers, he really wanted us to try to give some new people a shot at writing a story, some new artists a shot. And, what he really liked was, I want to use some characters nobody else likes. So we can get, see those characters again. Let's see if somebody can pump some life into some of these characters. So, he was a character, let me tell you.
Yeah, I love the Solo Avengers title of the. With comics myself, I've sold and started again and sold and started again. These days, I read a lot digitally, but what I collect is the out of print stuff, or the kind of hard to find stuff. So I've got a long run of Solo Avengers because I loved it so much as a kid. I started with #1 and loved Hawkeye, and it was Hawkeye found his way back if he wasn't in every issue. I'm trying to remember, but it's pretty frequent.
Yeah, well, that was Mark had a big thing with Hawkeye, and he was trying to. They wouldn't let him do a whole series with him, so he put him in Solo Avengers as the lead feature, and then the backup feature was
somebody else,
other characters. So that's where I got I sold Dwayne McDuffie, and I sold our first story to Solo Avengers.
Awesome,
which was funny because it never actually showed up in Solo Avengers. The first one we sold was a Black Knight story.
Okay,
and I unfortunately got a fairly lousy artist to draw it named Alan Davis. Maybe.
Oh no.
And no, Alan's amazing, but it didn't get finished until the book had gotten canceled. So it showed up in like Marvel Superheroes.
Okay.
Because it was Alan Davis and Paul Neary. Did the artwork, and I colored a Killraven series that Alan had asked me to color, and he sent me the splash page to that story that we had written as a thank you.
Yeah.
And that was really nice. I mean, I didn't expect it. Just showed up. And I was like, holy cow.
I kind of have a similar story, and this will be funny. It was related to the Avengers, the West Coast Avengers, which was my Avengers because it came out when I was 10. The last issue, I wrote a letter to the editor that got published in Force Works #1, which was not a very remarkable title, but that was the summer I graduated from high school, and I was living with my dad on the other side of the state. I live in Michigan, and I was home for a weekend, and I had a big envelope, huge, manila from Marvel, and it was the paste up page which I
Oh, that's
saved.
awesome.
And I have it framed. I bought the house I grew up in, so it's framed in the den here in my house. Yeah. So it's.
Who sent that to you?
Gosh, I had the envelope it came in for years, and I think it just simply said Marvel Comics, Park Avenue, New York City, blah blah blah. So
Wow, I
yeah,
wonder who sent that. I didn't, I wonder if they did that for other people. That's actually very cool. I have
yeah,
like some of the bullpen bulletin pages that I
yeah.
did some work on,
I
and they
will
gave me
I
those,
will
and
snap
that
you.
was fun.
I'll snap you a picture and send it to you because it was
That's cool. That is cool. I used to love to do the letters columns because now you get immediate reaction of how much your shit sucks from the
email
internet.
helps, social media.
But
Yeah,
back then, you would get these letters, and I would love the ones that were tearing into something because I love to be able to correct them.
yeah.
But every once in a while, you'd get a letter and you're like, wow, they're right. I gotta stop doing that. Because some of them, pick up on stuff. Now it's funny. I find stuff online about stuff I wrote, and they picked some weird thing up that it's not. I didn't write that, but they think it's in there, and I was like, really? And I have to go back and read. And I
Yeah,
went,
right.
all right, I can see how you might have thought that, but
Yeah.
that wasn't my intention.
Oh, that's funny. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it's so different because you may only get 5 or 6 letters a month on some titles, so you didn't really know how most people thought. You just knew how these 5 people that they write in because they always get on the letters page.
Right. Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
would sometimes make up letters because we didn't have enough letters to write.
Oh my
So
gosh. That's funny.
there's a few letters from a few assistant editors we had them write, and we had them write really, really nasty critical letters in. Well, it's easy to write, gosh, you guys are the best. It was
Yeah,
much
right.
more fun to have them, tear into.
Yeah, right. Were you around for the famous Assistant Editors Month? What was that, back in 83 or 84?
No, that was before I got there. And man, that would have been fun.
Yeah.
To see, because I love a lot of the comics that came out that month.
Yeah, I remember. I could pour back through, and the genesis behind that was like, oh, all the editors are at San Diego Comic-Con, which is funny to, or wherever it is they were. It seems like that was it, and they were like, and we've taken over, and it was just all the zany stuff going on, and
yeah, but it takes like months to put out a comic,
right? So it was, yeah, it was just it was a little
and
bit.
San
of
Diego
theater.
lasts 3 or 4 days, so
Exactly, yeah.
A lot of the times, you kind of you make stuff up for the fans to pump it up because it sounds more fun than it's like if you ever visited the Marvel offices, it's a major disappointment because it's a bunch of offices with closed doors, and the bullpen is not people making comics, it's people. Well, I don't even know what the bullpen looks like now, but
Right.
it was people making lettering corrections,
Very exciting,
and pasting stuff up. The good part was the Ramita's Raiders, which was the art interns who were interning under John Romita, who were learning how to do comics. And what they did was they did art corrections.
Yeah.
But they were learning how to ink like Tom Palmer, ink like Joe Rubenstein, to make the corrections so that they matched. And what would happen is a lot of them would be the ones who would get to do a couple pages in a really late book. So they would get that opportunity to show what they could really do. So a lot of them, I used a lot of them for a lot of different tasks, but a lot of them would then go on to becoming actual creators that did a lot of work. I mean, Kevin McGuire was actually one of the Raiders at one point. Jose Marzan was one of the Raiders. Tom Morgan.
Yeah. I like Tom Morgan. Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty big list of people that went on to do some tremendous work. And I was happy that I was able to give some of them some of their early work.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was fun because you go out and sometimes you go out there and Walt Simonson would be sitting with the Raiders, either talking to them or finishing inking a page. Joe Rubenstein would be in there inking a page. Al Milgram would be in there inking a page. You just never knew who was going to be hanging around.
Yeah.
At any given moment. And, they were all very approachable. Nobody that worked at Marvel was, they didn't look at them as if they were peons. They were just some guy that came in to ink a page. So you could just go sit and talk to Walt Simonson for an hour, and have him tell you why he's inking a page the way he's inking it. John Buscema would come in and,
Boy, I tell you, somebody says I have a time machine, I'm going to go back and do this thing or do that thing. I would probably just go to the 80s, to the Marvel office and just...
Oh, it was glorious.
Yeah, be a fly on a wall.
It's funny, you had talked about having Chris Claremont on your show at one point, and you know, when you worked with Chris thought it was a lot of fun to come into your office for hours and read his fan mail to you. You know,
and you're too polite to say anything. You go, oh, it's Chris Claremont. What am I supposed to do?
well, that's it. I was happy, and then when he was done with me, that he was done. But Chris was a lot of fun to work with. I have
Yeah.
to say, I enjoyed working with Chris. I did get to fly in his plane once,
Oh.
right through a thunderstorm. That was
Oh
terrible.
my God.
But I thanked him and the pilot by taking them for dinner on Marvel.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chris he was fun to work with.
Yeah.
Chris was glorious to go to plot conferences with, because he so many ideas. I mean, great ideas just
Yeah.
flow out of him.
Yeah.
And the passion that he had for all the characters it was really something to see.
He was cracking me and my partner up. I should send you a link to the interview because it was 4 or 5 months ago. But like I said, I usually knock these out in 30 minutes, and it was nearly 2 hours. It's just because how are you going to stop him?
Yeah, I mean,
he's fascinating.
How many questions can you ask? There's he had, what is it, over a 15-year run?
Oh, yeah, 17 years, I think it was, on X-Men. Yeah.
Crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Well, you're the first person I've had on with a resume as a colorist. So beyond the obvious, what does a colorist do? Tell me what a colorist does, and tell me how it's changed. I mean, these days I pick up a comic and it says colored by VC's blah, 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 like some guy's name. And I don't really know what all of that means. How is that different? And how was it back in the day?
Well, when I started, coloring was still being done the way it was done, for 20 years before, where you essentially got a Xerox copy of the black and white line art that was already lettered, because back then that's how it came. And then you would color it up. You only had 64 colors to choose from. So you would use those 64 colors to color the comic. And then you would have to put little codes on it to tell what that color was. Then it would go to what's called the color separators, who, and this is nuts. I went and watched them do it. What they did was they had they had one sheet of acetate that was, the clear stuff that had the black and white line art. Then they had 9 other ones. So, so each color had 3 shades on it. So what they would do is they would put the 100% yellow acetate on top of the black and white line art. And then they would take like a Q-tip and this opaque ink stuff, and they would just go into all the areas that had 100% yellow in it. Then they would go through and do all the 50% yellow, and then all the 10% yellow. And then they do the same thing for the red and the same thing for the blue. These sheets would then be photographed to turn into the dot screens. So the 100% didn't really get it, was just open. It was all the ink. The 50% was a slight, had bigger dots than the ones had the little ones. So you can understand why you didn't get great color a lot of times.
Faded a bit.
So the color was a lot more simple. But some people like Bernie Wrightson, Jim Steranko, they figured out how to really, and Barry Windsor-Smith figured out how to do it in such a way that it made it easy for them, but it looked really complex on the page.
Yeah.
Tom Palmer had explained how to do that to me, and I got a lot better results by thinking about them. So, if you try not to use, all 9 sheets on every panel, it's a lot easier. So when you're only using 2 or 3 colors in a panel, it made it easier so they could take their time and do a little bit better work.
Right.
From there, it shifted to, they figured out how to do the separations on a computer. Some people were actually they were doing airbrushes. If you did an Epic book, they could do some airbrushing, and they were literally, on those sheets, they were airbrushing the stuff to get the stuff. So we went from that to where the computers, and we started being able to have more colors. And they were like, you don't have to code it anymore. Bullshit. If you didn't code it, what you got back was horrifying. I'm sorry, but brown and green fire is not what I was looking for. So I would still code it. And then finally, people moved into coloring it themselves on the computer, so you would get the results. Problem is the printing. They had to work on getting the printing right, because people would it looks one way on the computer screen and then it prints this other way, usually muddy.
Right.
So you kind of have to calibrate. You have to learn how to calibrate your screen and what colors to use and not to use in order to reproduce what you're looking at on the screen to what you're going to see in the printed comic. And that can vary between the type of paper that's used and whatever. So now we can do anything we want. So, we've gone from, essentially when I started, they wanted you to color the characters their normal colors and then find some background they'll pop off against. And a lot of colorists were really lazy. So, they would just, color cap solid blue, red, red, white, and blue. No matter that the artist may have drawn some lighting on there, some highlights, they just colored right over. Sometimes there was only so much you could do, but they would just ignore it.
Yeah.
Once the computer started, people started doing way too much rendering. As a matter of fact, they started doing so much rendering that they were actually rendering against what the artist drew. So you would get all this stuff that, that would infuriate the artist because everything they did was just covered in this oversaturated, muddy rendering that wasn't going the way they did it. Things have changed quite a bit at this point. Most of the colorists, they are artists. So they've elevated it to this other level. So they're working with the pencilers. I just finished working on a project in which I'm actually co-coloring it with the artist, and we were only coloring over the pencils. So he started altering what he did based on how we colored it. So he went back and erased some of the pencil work on the page and then inked some things just to get the final look that you want.
Right.
And a lot of pencilers are choosing a colorist that understands what they're doing. So there are things that are just done in the color now, as opposed to, when, we had to do the books, just whatever the pencil and inker did, that's what you're coloring. Now they'll leave big, giant open chunks of stuff. And you can also knock back, if the artist has done too much with the black and white, you can knock parts of it back. You can colorize it. So it's changed a lot, and there's a lot more expectation that you're going to do these things, but you're not really being paid what we used to get paid. I got paid more in the early 2000s and the 90s when I was starting to do my own color seps than I get paid today, and we're expected to do a lot more. And that's something that can be said for pencilers and inkers. There's a lot more. They're doing a lot more work for less money. You see a lot of the books. You see the inker or the penciler or whoever. They're doing gray tones on top. They're not getting paid extra to do all that gray tones. That takes a lot of work. And then you can colorize all the gray tones. So it can be really beautiful. There's some people doing just amazing work out there. But it's changed from, we can grab anybody and teach them to color to you really have to know what you're doing or you're going to make a mess.
Yeah.
And everybody's a lot more critical. Now you can see, because after I color a page, I send it to the artist. They can look at it and say, hey, you really ruined this, or hey, this is great, or hey, I want you to fix this. But that's the thing. You get that immediate thing. When I was doing it before, the penciler wouldn't know what anybody did on top of his work until several months later. They've already penciled a bunch of stuff. They don't know what they probably got to see Xerox copies of the inks, but they don't know what the colorist did. So because I was very trusted back then, a lot of people wanted me to color their book because they knew I was paying attention to the lighting. They knew I was going to do something interesting. So they knew that, they didn't know with somebody else.
Right.
When I was an editor, I constantly got people complaining about certain colorists because they didn't do things the way they wanted it.
Yeah.
There's not much I could always do with that. Sometimes when I worked for Mark Grunwald, he wouldn't let me get rid of some people that I thought we should move on with.
Yeah.
But once I became an editor, if I didn't hire anybody whose work I didn't like. I asked the artist if I was starting a book, who would you like? Why would you like that person?
Gotcha. My fondest memory of kind of weird colors is we were just my partner and I reviewed the first appearance of Galactus right after Fantastic Four came out, and his first full appearance on the last page of FF number 48, he is Christmas. He's red and green.
Well, then there's sometimes he's got like naked legs.
Yeah, right.
He's colored so many different, and I don't know what happened. That usually there's, somebody does you have a thing. Here's the colors, but Kirby didn't necessarily draw him the same each time either. which is fine, but the colors, because I did the Origin of Galactus, I recolored that,
Okay.
and one of the things they asked me to do was to keep him consistent, because it was several things had been put together for that, so I modernized it a little bit, but ultimately I was trying to just keep it, so that the colors were in the right spot on Galactus because they were shifting before.
Yeah. Right. Right. Wild. Oh my goodness. This has been awesome. And I've learned more than I could possibly think about anything that I knew before. So this has really been a treat. What
Let me tell you something about color.
Please.
It's
tell
really
me
not,
more.
it's less about making it look cool, and you're using the color to tell a story. And that was something, I used from my my education at film school, because cinematographers are using color very specifically to elicit certain responses in the movies. And if you go back and you watch, and you just watch it for the color, it's astounding how often you didn't realize that whole scene was in blue and red, and this
Right.
scene over here was yellow, and how the color changes. So I kept trying to do that with each scene to help separate the scene, but also trying to find colors that help tell that story. So if people were having breakfast in the morning and it was just a simple scene, you're not going to color it in oranges and reds and make it look like hell. You're going to
Hell
color it,
breakfast.
in sort of morning colors, where the sky is bright and whatnot. Whereas when it's dark out, people used to just color, the characters are normal color, and maybe a little purple in the background. Well, no, how about if you darken the characters, or maybe put them in shadow?
Right.
And every time I did that, the artists would just go crazy, because I remember when Klaus Janson first noticed what I was doing, it was when I was really doing, I used blue and yellow on a page, and that was it, but I mean, shades of both. And he's like, wow, that's really effective, and I really like how this works. And he's explaining it to me, what I did right and how it was right. And I was like, this is the greatest day ever, because I loved Klaus's color.
Yeah.
And I had, I stole from his color palettes and stuff. And same with Tom Palmer, who taught me a tremendous amount. Tom was a mentor for me.
Yeah.
But I knew I was onto something, because the creators were liking this weird stuff I was doing. The editors I had to convince, because I would get comment, why is the Hulk, blue? And I said, because he's in shadow with everybody else who's colored blue, but he's green. He's green when he's in daylight, but it's dark, and they couldn't see what I was seeing, and I thought, wow, I have to find a language. But when the fans responded to this better, and the creators all did it, they just started to learn the best thing to do is to shut the fuck up and let me do what I do.
Yeah.
Because everybody was liking it.
Right.
And I actually had DC had me talk to their colorists, because they were not happy with everybody was just coloring. Superman would just color Superman colors all the time, and that was why I told them. I said, we need to tell the story with the color, and I said, each scene should have its own color. And I said, and if Superman's in the dark, maybe don't color him his regular colors. Maybe choose some other colors that make it look like he's in the dark.
Right.
Batman was easy. When I got on Batman, I told Danny O'Neil, I may not color Batman his normal colors ever, and I'm going to change all the villains' colors. And he went, okay, as long as it looks good and storytelling works. Yeah. And that was a big thing for Denny. Is he called me a couple times because he thought the storytelling didn't work in the black and white, because it was where there was every other panel was a scene. So this scene was taking place here, this scene was taking place there. And he called me and says, I need you to do something. And I said, yeah, I already did. I said, this one's blue and this one's yellow. And he goes, oh, perfect. And I was like, that's good. I was like, okay. Then he understood what I was doing and why I was doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of what you're supposed to be doing as a colorist. Some of the color today, I look at and I go, well, they're just trying to make it look really cool. And it does. But there should be storytelling in your coloring, just like there's storytelling and lettering. Every aspect of it. Comics are about telling a story. It's not about just drawing a fucking pinup.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, this has been an incredible chat, and I'm absolutely grateful. What are you working on these days? How do people find you? How do they see your stuff?
Well, I'm on Facebook. See, that's the best place to find me. I'm also on Instagram at gwrightstuff. I do not hang out on X. I can be found on Blue Sky. Is that what it is? I don't
Yes.
post on there very often. Mostly, I'm on Facebook. I frequently post little essays about the true stories about how comics really work, because
Nice.
a lot of so-called historians and certain types of fans think they know everything. And
Oh,
if you
always.
haven't done comics, you really don't know how it
Yeah,
works. I don't care how many
absolutely.
times you talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Podcasters don't do that. Oddly enough, podcasters have a tendency to ask, how did you do that? You know?
Well, yeah, I don't do it.
Yeah,
Why
Facebook's the
why would
best
I
place
tell
to
you?
find me.
Yeah.
If you find me on Instagram, I'm probably posting pictures of food. Um,
It's usually me after I'm playing pickleball. It's pictures of my cat, something like that. That's my
so
Instagram.
I keep meaning to tell you this. I don't know if you knew this, but I actually colored a Marvel DC crossover that happened this summer. If they would have combined them, Superman Fantastic Four,
Yes.
which was in a giant digest format. And I think it's really interesting that I think they're great. Both the Superman movie was great, and I thought the Fantastic Four movie was great. So I thought it
Absolutely.
was kind of fun that, oh, I actually colored these two things
Oh
together.
my gosh. And you said that came out this summer? Or
No,
that
no,
was
no.
something from
That
the
came out
past?
years
Oh, okay.
ago. Dan
Okay.
Jurgens wrote it. Artsy
Okay.
Bear inked it. I colored it, and Digital Chameleon did the separations. They did a
Oh,
gorgeous
awesome.
job.
Is that
So you can
still out
probably
there?
find it, but
Yeah, I
I
still
mean,
find it.
they've reprinted it in like some of the collections of the Marvel DC crossovers. But I mean, when you see it in that big digest, I don't know why they call it digest. I think of a small, but it was that big, huge,
The omnibus?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of like I almost think I'm not sure if it's almost full size to how it was penciled, but
Right.
that was really cool to
Yeah.
be part of that. And who doesn't want to see Superman and the Fantastic Four
Oh
together?
my God, it sounds fantastic. I may have to seek that out. What are you working on these days? What's in your
Currently,
tablet?
I'm working on a book with Graham Nolan called Escape from Monster Island. We're almost
Ooh,
finished with that. It's a really really fun comic about this island that's full of monsters and these two military agents that are constantly getting into silly trouble
awesome.
on the island with monsters. So if you like monsters, it's a really fun comic. You can the kids can read it and everything.
Cool.
We're just about finished with that. I'm I'm working on a sort of a secret, really violent Western comic that I'm doing with Ron Wagner
Nice.
and Larry Hama, and that's the one. Ron and I are kind of co-coloring that,
Yeah.
and I'm really proud of that. I can't wait till they can actually show pages of that and show it off. And then there's a super secret project over at DC that is something that I once upon a time worked on, and is now going to come back whenever we get it finished.
Awesome. Larry,
But
I'm
I think
a
people will be really
yeah.
happy to see. I'm really proud that I'm getting to get back getting the team back together. So the whole team is back together doing that one. So
That's awesome. Well, I would love to see. I'm a huge fan of GI Joe, and I one of my bucket lists is I got to talk to Larry several months ago. So I've got GI Joe is all on the other side of the wall here.
oh
So
well,
that's
Ron Wagner's another GI Joe artist as
that's
well.
right. Yeah, he did a
Yeah.
lot of some of those kind of early issues. I know
Yeah.
those. I have the big volume they published last year to my left here.
Oh,
I
nice.
know that those 155 issues by heart. Big
Wow.
fan. Yeah. Yeah, big stuff. Well, this has been great. Thank you again so much for joining me.
Oh, sure. Anytime. Have me back whenever you want to talk about anything else.
You better believe it. Patreons, thanks for tuning in. If you're listening to this on our free feed, please visit patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. Try us out for 7 days for free, and we'll see you next time on The Spotlight.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.